this lecture, let's learn about another route guard of Angular called as CanDeactivate route guard and what is its use and how to implement it. So we use CanDeactivate route guard to decide if the user can navigate away from a route or not. And this route guard is called whenever we try to navigate away from the current route. The best use case where we can use CanDeactivate route guard is, let's say we have a form, user has filled up the form, but before submitting the form, he's trying to navigate away from the current route. Okay, so the user has filled the data in the form, but instead of submitting the form, he has clicked on some other link. Now, the user might have clicked that link by mistake, and the data which he has entered in the form that is not currently saved. So we can use this CanDeactivate route guard to confirm from the user whether he really wants to navigate away from that route or not. So instead of navigating the user right away, we will get a confirmation from the user whether he really wants to navigate away from that route. If he chooses to navigate away, then we will navigate the user away from that route. Otherwise, we will keep the user in the same route. Let's understand CanDeactivate route guard with an example. So in our Angular application, if I go to this contact link, in here we have a contact form where the user can enter his first name, last name, his country, and some message in this subject text area. And then he can submit this form. Now let's say the user has entered his details, maybe his first name, his last name. He has also selected his country and he has entered some message. Now, without clicking on this submit button, if he tries to navigate away from this page, what we want is we want to get a confirmation from the user whether he really wants to navigate away, because the user has unsaved changes. So when the user has unsaved changes, before navigating the user away from this current route, from this contact page, we will get the confirmation from the user. And based on that, we will either navigate the user away from the route or we will keep the user in this same route. For that, we can use CanDeactivate route guard. So let's see how we can implement CanDeactivate route guard. Let's go to VS Code. And here we want to use CanDeactivate route guard on this contact route. Okay. Now again, till Angular 14, we used to use CanDeactivate interface in order to implement CanDeactivate route guard. But from Angular 15, instead of using CanDeactivate interface, we use a functional approach. And I'm going to show you both the approaches here. So let's first see how we used to implement CanDeactivate route guard till Angular 14. Let's go to our auth guard service here. There we have this auth guard service class, which is currently implementing from CanActivate and CanActivate child interface. Now what I want is, I'm also going to implement CanDeactivate interface for this auth guard service. So here let's specify CanDeactivate, and in order to use this CanDeactivate, we also need to import it from Angular/router. Okay, and this CanDeactivate interface, it is of generic type. So here we also need to specify a type, and we want to use this CanDeactivate route guard on this contact route. And for the contact route, which view we are displaying the view of contact component. So there, the type I'm going to specify as contact component. And in order to use this contact component, we also need to import it. So in this way, we are inheriting from this CanDeactivate interface, and there we have specified the type as contact component. Now this CanDeactivate interface, it provides a method called as CanDeactivate. So since this auth guard service class, it is implementing this CanDeactivate interface, we need to implement CanDeactivate method. Okay, and this CanDeactivate method, it takes 4 parameters. The first parameter will be the component, and its type will be the component class on which we want to use this CanDeactivate route guard. The second parameter is of type activated route snapshot. We are calling it current route. The third parameter, it is of type router state snapshot. We are calling it current state. And the fourth parameter, which is an optional parameter, it is also of type router state snapshot, and we are calling it next state. And this CanDeactivate function here, it should return either a Boolean value or it should return an observable which emits a Boolean value, or it should return a promise which resolves to a Boolean value. Okay, so let me go ahead and let me remove this return type from here. All right, now what we learned, that this function should return a Boolean value. Okay, also let me move these parameters in a separate line so that it will be readable. All right, now from this function, let's first return true. Okay, this function should return a Boolean value. Now, this authguard service, it is implementing this CanDeactivate interface, and for that interface, it has also implemented this CanDeactivate method. Now, we can go ahead and we can use this authguard service class on those routes where we want to use CanDeactivate route guard. So let's go to routing module. There we want to use the CanDeactivate route guard on this route. So each route also has a property called CanDeactivate. To this property also we need to assign an array, and inside this array we need to specify the service class which is implementing from CanDeactivate interface. In our case, this authguard service class, it is implementing from CanDeactivate interface. So let's specify it here. Let's save the changes. Let's go to the web page, and there we have used the CanDeactivate route guard on this contact page. So currently we are in the contact page. Now we have learned that the CanDeactivate route guard gets called when we try to navigate away from the current route. Okay, we are using this CanDeactivate route guard on this contact route. So when I try to navigate away from this route, at that time CanDeactivate route guard will be called. So if I try to navigate away to courses page, the CanDeactivate route guard will be called. Currently from the CanDeactivate method, we are returning true. So that's why we are able to navigate away. But if I return false, in that case, we will not be able to navigate away. If I save the changes, let's go to contact page. And now, since we are returning false from the CanDeactivate method, now we will not be able to navigate away from this contact page. So if I click on this courses link, you see I'm not able to navigate away. If I click on this about link, I'm not able to navigate away. If I click on this home link, I'm not able to navigate away. Okay, so from this CanDeactivate method, if we return true, then the user will be allowed to navigate away from the route. But if we return false, the user will not be allowed to navigate away from the route. The user will stay put in the same route. Now here, instead of returning a hard-coded value, we want to return a Boolean value based on some condition. And the condition is going to be, let's say, if the user has entered some text in these text boxes and he's trying to navigate away without saving the changes, at that time, we want to get the confirmation from the user whether he really wants to navigate away. So what I'm going to do is, for these fields, I'm going to create properties in our contact component class. Let's scroll up. Here we have our contact component. In the contact component class, let's go ahead and let's create 4 properties. First property will be first name. It is going to be of type string, and initially I'll assign it with empty string. Then let's create another property called last name. It is also going to be of type string, and initially it will be empty string. Then let's create another property called country for country dropdown. It is also going to be of type string, and initially let's say the initial value for this country should be USA. So whenever the page loads for the first time, USA should be selected by default. So for that I can say USA. Okay, because if I go to contact component.html, there you will notice that we have this country drop down, and there we have this option called USA, and for that the value is USA, and this value I'm assigning here. So in that case, that USA option will be selected by default. Then finally, let's also have a message property. It is also going to be of type string, and initially it will be empty string. Now what I want is, I want to bind these properties to these input elements. For that, I'm going to use two-way data binding using ng model directive. So here in order to use ng model, we need to use square brackets. Inside that, we need to use a set of parentheses. And in there, we can say ng model. And to that, let's assign a property. So here we want to bind this input element, this first name input element with first name property. In the same way, let me copy this line. We want to bind this last name input element with last name property. Then we want to bind this country input to country property. And finally, we want to bind this text area to message property. Let's save the changes. And now, since we are using ng model here, we also need to import forms module from angular/form in our module file. So let's scroll down. Let's go to app module.ts. There, again, let's scroll down to imports array and let's import forms module from angular/forms. Let's save the changes again. Let's close this file. All right, so here we have done two-way data binding. So now what will happen is whatever value we will enter inside this first name input, that value will be assigned to this first name property. In the same way, whatever value the user will input inside this last name input element, that value will be assigned to this last name property. Then whatever country the user will select from this drop down, that country value will be assigned to this country property. And whatever value the user will enter inside this text area, that value will be assigned to this message property. Then let's also create a property called is submitted. It is going to be of type Boolean, and initially let's set it to false. Okay, and what I'm going to do is on this input button, I'm going to bind click event, and when this button is clicked, I want to call on submit method. Let's go ahead and let's create this on submit method inside our component class, and there I will simply set this dot is submitted to true. Next, let's create another method and let's call it can exit. And in this method, we are going to check if this first name property has some value, that means if it is not empty string, or if this last name property has some value, or this message property has some value, and the submit button is not clicked yet, that means this is submitted is false. And if the user tries to navigate away, in that case, we will first get confirmation from the user whether he really wants to navigate. Then only we will either navigate the user away from the route or we will keep the user in the same route. So here inside this canExit method, let's write an if statement, and in there we are going to check if this dot first name has some value. That means if this dot first name is not empty string, and remember that empty string is a falsy value. So if the user has not entered anything in the first name input field, in that case this first name will be empty string and the empty string will be falsy value. So this expression here, it will return false. Then we will also check if this dot last name, it is also not empty string. Okay, again empty string is a falsy value. So if this last name is storing an empty string, in that case this condition here, it will return false. Similarly, we will also check for message. So here we will say this dot message. This should also not be empty string. So if first name has some value, or if last name has some value, or this message has some value, in that case, if the user tries to navigate away, we want to get a confirmation from the user. For that, I am going to use this confirm function. And here we will say, you have unsaved changes. Do you want to navigate away? Okay, and this confirm function, it is going to return a Boolean value true or false. If the user clicks on OK button, it will return true. If the user clicks on cancel button, it will return false. So that Boolean value we want to return from here. Okay, and then let's also write this else part. And from the else part, we are simply going to return true. Okay. Now we want to use this CanExit method, and whatever value this CanExit method will return, that we want to return from this CanDeactivate route guard. So here we have an instance of this contact component inside this component parameter, because if you see, the type for this component parameter is contact component. So here we can simply say return component dot can exit. Okay, let's save the changes. Let's go to the web page and let's see if this implementation works or not. So currently we are in the contact page. We have not filled anything in the form. If I try to navigate away, it is allowing us to navigate away. Now if I go to the contact page and if I enter something, and now if I try to navigate away, for some reason we are able to navigate away. Let me actually see if we have any error. So here we have an error and it says if ng model is used within a form tag, either the name attribute must be set or the form control must be defined. Okay, so here if I go back and if we go to contact component.html, you will notice that we have created this form. Inside this form we have these input elements, but on these input elements we don't have a name. So what I will do is I will add a name attribute on each of these tags. With this, let's save the changes. Let's go back to the web page. Let me enter something and let me try to navigate away. So you see, now we are getting this message. You have unsaved changes. Do you want to navigate away? If I click on this cancel button, we will stay in the same route. But if we click on this OK button, we will be navigated away. As you can see, now we are navigated away to courses page. So this is how we use CanDeactivate route guard. Okay, currently we don't have any unsaved changes because we have not filled anything in the form. If I try to navigate away, it should allow us. But if I fill something, and let's say last name also, and without submitting the form, if I try to navigate away, it is showing us this confirm window where it asks, you have unsaved changes, do you want to navigate away? If I click on cancel, we will stay put in the same route. But if we click on this OK button, we will be navigated away. Now there is one more condition which I want to add here. So let's go to contact component.ts. So we want to check if any of these fields has a value and if the is submitted is false. That means the form is not submitted. Then only we want to show this confirm window. Otherwise, if the form is submitted, then user should be allowed to navigate away. So for that, what I will do is I will wrap these three conditions within parenthesis like this. And after that, I will use AND operator, and there I will say this dot is submitted. So if this dot is submitted is false, so for that, before this, I'll use a not operator. Okay, so as long as this is submitted is false and any of these properties has a value, we will not allow user to navigate away without saving the changes. All right, let's save the changes here. Now let's go back to authguard service.ts file. And there you will notice that for this CanDeactivate method, we are explicitly specifying the component type as contact component. That means we can only use this CanDeactivate route guard on contact component. But what if we want to use it on other components as well? For that, what we can do is we can create an interface. We can create that interface in a separate file, or we can also create it here. So before this class, I am going to create an interface. And to create an interface, we use interface keyword. And I'm going to call this interface deactivate component. You can name this anything, okay? And in order to make this interface available in other files as well, I'm also going to use the export keyword here so that we can use this interface in other files. And this interface is going to expose a method. We are going to call this method CanExit. Okay. And what this method is going to return? It is either going to return a Boolean value, or it is going to return an observable which should emit a Boolean value, or it should return a promise which resolves to a Boolean value. And now any class which inherits from this interface, it has to provide an implementation for this CanExit method. And here, instead of specifying a component class name, we will use this interface name, which is IDEactivate component. So now the type here for this CanDeactivate is going to be IDEactivate component. Okay. And here also, instead of saying contact component, we will say IDEactivate component. And this IDEactivate component has this CanExit method because it is exposing this CanExit method, and we are calling it on this component. Okay. Now, on whichever component we want to use this CanDeactivate route, that component should inherit from this IDEactivate component interface. Currently, we only want to use this CanDeactivate route on the contact component. So here, this component should inherit. For that, we can use this implements keyword, and it should implement from IDEactivate component. And in order to use this IDEactivate component, we also need to import it from this file. And since this contact component is now implementing from this IDEactivate component, it needs to provide an implementation for this CanExit method. And we are already doing that. We are already implementing this CanExit method. With this, if we save the changes, the functionality should still be working. Let's go back. Let's go to contact page. Let's type something here, and let's try to navigate away. You see, it is asking for our confirmation. If I click on cancel, we will stay in the same page. But if I click on this OK button, we will be navigated away. So this is how we can implement CanDeactivate route guard in Angular till Angular 14. But from Angular 15, the way we implement CanDeactivate route guard, it has changed. And let me show you how we can implement CanDeactivate route guard in Angular 15 and higher versions. So till Angular 14, what we had to do? We had to create a service class. That service class should implement from CanDeactivate interface, and it should also provide an implementation for this CanDeactivate method, which should return a Boolean value based on whether we want the user to navigate away from the route or not. Now from Angular 15, what we can do is, so from here I will simply remove this auth guard service, and here what we can do is we can simply pass a function. Now you can also create this function in a separate file and assign this function here, or you can also write a function like this. Now this function, it is going to receive a property. Let's call that property comp. And here we need to specify the type for that comp parameter. And this comp parameter, it should be of type component class. So here we can specify any component class. Currently we want to use this CanDeactivate route guard on this contact component. So I'm going to specify the type here as contact component. And now from within the body, all we have to do is we can say return comp dot, and this CanDeactivate component has this CanExit method. So let's select that method and let's also call it. And that's it. Let's save the changes. Let's go to the web page, and this implementation should also be working. Let's go to contact page. Here I have not entered anything in the form. If I try to navigate away, I should be able to navigate away. But if I enter something in these input elements, and without submitting, if I try to navigate away, you see, we are seeing this window. It asks, you have unsaved changes. Do you want to navigate away? If I click on cancel button, I will stay put. But if I click on OK button, I will be navigated away. So this is how we can implement CanDeactivate route guard in Angular 15 and higher versions. Okay, we can also create this function separately in a separate file. For example, if we want, we can create this function inside our authguard.ts file where we are creating function for CanActivate and CanActivate child. So that is also possible. Alright, so I hope now you have a better understanding of what CanDeactivate route guard is, when do we use it, and how we can implement it in Angular application. Now, this approach here which we are using, here we are using CanDeactivate function. Okay, but here we are using CanDeactivate interface in order to implement CanDeactivate route guard. This is all from this lecture. If you have any questions, then feel free to ask it. Thank you for listening and have a great day.